Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. We're all members of the LILA team, and today we're going to have a conversation about how our different racial and cultural backgrounds have influenced what wellness means to us. So before we get into it, we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. So I'm Star, and right now I'm currently in New Jersey.
I'm Danielle, I'm from Michigan.
I'm Anupriya and I'm from Mumbai, India.
I'm Kyra and I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
I'm Juliana and I'm from Chicago.
Awesome. So we're clearly all over the place right now, but we're going to have just a nice conversation about how kind of wellness, like, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, but sometimes it kind of gets marketed that way. So we really want to take this time to just explore the ways that our different racial and cultural backgrounds have shaped what our definitions of wellness mean, and just how they've sort of always been there in the background as we have been experiencing different wellness journeys. So to begin, I'm just gonna kind of open up the floor, and if anyone wants to share any positive ways that your relationship to wellness has been shaped by your racial and cultural background, feel free to start.
Something that I'll say, like just very quickly, is for a long time, I was probably insecure isn't the right word, but discourse surrounding my hair has been like a very consistent thread throughout my life, and just seeing the ways in which like the hair industry has changed to reflect a little bit more diversity has been encouraging to see. So in terms of how positive ways in which my culture informs my wellness journey, just to be proud of like what I've naturally got. Like, I don't need to worry about trends, but at the same time, I'm also free to do whatever I want. And that's what's important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so important to point out how like something so as like insignificant as maybe people think their hair is, like for people, like for Black people, it's something that has been used to sort of like try to either categorize Black people as like different or like not beautiful, but it is something that's really important to kind of consider, like just like the way that people portray Black hair. So that's awesome that has been something that's like changed for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone else want to share something?
So for me, like growing up in India, I have always, like my entire life, lived in like a joint family. So we're more than like the entire building right now is like my entire like family, my cousins and my relatives, my aunts, my uncles. So it's everybody. So for me, like when someone says wellness, it's like the first thing that comes to my mind is like family. So for me, like growing up in like a sort of collectivistic culture, wellness is not something that's only a priority for me, but I want to make sure it's a priority for each and every one of us in the family, like whether it's like during like lockdown, just spending time on the terrace together, or just having like a good dinner, those sort of things, whether it's emotional or social wellness, just being together. So yeah
that's great, especially since like nowadays, like many people are stuck with their families, and I think people kind of have like this feeling of like, oh my goodness, yet another day. But it's so important to like realize how special this time is, and especially if you're living with so many members of your family, I think that's really awesome. Yeah,
Sort of related to that, like my mom's family is from Indonesia, and they're very similar, like multiple generations living in the same house. And that's something I've always kind of had to grapple with, because I've lived in the United States my whole life. So and I would say the US is probably a little bit more individualistic as a culture. So kind of having to grapple with, oh, this is something that's really important to my mom in terms of wellness, but that's not something that we get so much here. So that's just been interesting to see like the difference between how wellness has changed over the course of my life, just in terms of like the way my mom raised me and the way she was raised,
Yeah, definitely. It's like a balancing act.
Yeah.
And on that note as well, with my family, there's a lot of like tried and true methods that we've been using for like pain relief and things like that. So white flour is a big thing that we use to treat basically everything. But although we have these like methods for treating physical pain, I feel like in Asian American culture, as well as just Asian culture in general, I feel like mental health is something that is shunned and isn't talked about. And in my family, it wasn't something that we talked about growing up. And so having to incorporate means and methods of wellness that I've learned here in America and through people from different cultures and just learning about how they like deal with mental health and how they treat their mental health issues is something that I've been incorporating into my daily life as well. So yeah, that's been a positive experience for me, but it's definitely been a battle.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, oh, sorry, Danielle, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say on that note, I guess that could be kind of a nice segue into maybe what are some obstacles or challenges you have faced regarding wellness that relates to your background, whether that's within like within what you've learned in your background and then like living in America, or like the way that Americans view your cultural and racial background, just kind of any way you want to take it.
So to build off of something that Juliana touched on, especially in the lane of mental health, so in African American or Black culture, the United States specifically, it's not that mental health necessarily shunned, but it's more of like this intrinsic distrust of like doctors and medical professionals at large, that if you are having a mental health issue, or frankly any other kind of issue, it's like you go to the doctor as the absolute last resort because you might be an experimental subject and not know. And like there are historical reasons for why that fear is instilled, but at the same time, like it's hard to navigate like when trusting is also necessary. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
there has to be a way to allow for that relationship to develop in a positive light.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for example, when vaccines come out, don't worry, my family, we're all for vaccines, but we're always like, wait, like we shouldn't be necessarily be the first ones to run and get it, because if you guys are familiar with the history of like the syphilis tests, like just when things, yeah, so there's like a hesitation when it comes to like anything, any condition, you try to treat it with other things first before you involve medical professionals, but especially for mental health, because like that is something that's a little bit less tangible than say like a broken bone.
Right, exactly. And it's like you were saying, it's hard because it's like you want it to move forward and like develop those relationship positively, but you have to always remember that like you have to protect yourself as well. So it's like yeah, that's really really good to hear.
Yeah, and I think sort of related to that, definitely not nearly as problematic as the background that Black individuals have had in healthcare, but kind of in the same vein of not always going directly to a medical professional is like in Indonesia, or maybe Southeast Asia in general, and maybe this is just like an Eastern versus Western like view on medicine and wellness, is, you know, if you're sick or you have a stomach ache or a headache, their first instinct isn't to go to the doctor, which I think a lot of people in Western culture, that is their first instinct. Maybe it is because they do have this greater trust for medicine as a whole, but at least in my mom's culture, there was always these like natural remedies they would do first, and then if that doesn't work, they go to the doctor, which I think kind of that definitely drove me more towards like holistic wellness and medicine in that regard. Like I hate the doctor. I don't like going to the doctor. And I've just always been very interested in like natural remedies and like all this holistic stuff that isn't necessarily considered like real in Western medicine, which, you know, I kind of wish it was, because I think a lot of these are rooted in really cool historical like people have used these for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it seems like in Western medicine that's kind of gone away a little bit. But I'm just thankful that my background has brought me that viewpoint in medicine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's like a lot of negative sort of misconceptions about like what holistic wellness actually means like in the West. So that's like, I think people really like should take the time to actually learn about like different ways to take care of yourself that don't just mean going to a doctor and like putting medicine in your body.
Yeah, I mean, like going off of what Danielle said, I experienced that literally like firsthand. You know, if I have like a cough, the first thing my mom will give me is like turmeric with like milk, hot
Mhm.
milk. I think,
Yeah,
like,
same.
yeah,
Also.
yeah. And like, I literally like on the terrace right now, we have like plants that are literally growing for like specific purposes. So we do not have to go to the doctor every single time. Because like my grandmother always says, like, we usually are the cause of our own problems and therefore are the solution of the same. So, you know, just trying to like
Love
work in our own ways. Yeah. So she always tells me that literally. So, you know, just figuring out solutions for ourselves is something that's like I've done like my entire life. And you know, when we talk about wellness, especially right now with everything that's going on in the news, you know, I feel like mental health is more important than ever. You know, just reading about like COVID, whether we're on Instagram or whether it's on any social media or just like switching on the telly for that matter, that's the first thing we see. So just taking our time off, disconnecting from all of that and just talking to someone, I think that's super important. And at least like in Asia, I think more or less, or at least in India for a fact, I know that speaking about mental illness or health is not very common. And oftentimes, as Juliana said, it's in fact shunned upon. So people would rather go to talk about like, you know, if they have a physical bruise or something, but not about their mental health. Um, Recently, this was like 2 days ago, one of the actors in the Bollywood film industry actually committed suicide because of mental health issues, and there was no one who he could actually speak to about it. So this entire problem is more rampant than ever, and that's kind of like one of the reasons I'm studying psychology, because I want to do something about it, but I don't exactly know at this stage what. But hopefully, you know, just something.
Yeah, I definitely relate to like being like studying psychology to want because I want to like be able to help somehow, because that shouldn't be the case, but it's a matter of changing like people's perspectives on the topic as a whole. Yeah.
And on a similar note as well, I feel like the Western view of East Asians is that we own nail salons, we own spas. So it's like wellness is this external thing that you add on top to kind of mask all of your other issues. And it kind of feeds into that cycle of consumerism, but it's not changing and fixing the problems that you have inside. And I feel like wellness is something that should start from the inside out and not the other way around. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Kyra, were you gonna say something?
No, I just wanted just to respond to something that Juliana said about like wellness starting from the inside out. I mean, something that has been very prominent in my experience is so mental health within my experience of the Black community. It's not, again, it's not necessarily shunned, but it's like, well, don't go to the doctor because, at least in my direct experience, because you have Jesus. So like, it's like sort of this like incorporation of religion as well. So, I mean, different people have different experiences as it pertains to like where they stand in their faith and whatnot. But I think it's interesting how like oftentimes when wellness is associated with like from the outside in, it doesn't allow for you to incorporate like your mental or spiritual or emotional needs to match that. So that is something that is navigated very heavily within my experience as a Black woman. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think like this whole outside in idea is so important because like you can't, even if you're like physically healthy, it's like you can't be well unless you are constantly taking care of your mind and your spirit and all of those things. And it's like I think it's kind of almost, I feel like at least the way that it gets talked about in the media a lot, it seems to be like, oh, you're either like have good mental health or you don't. But I think it's just like more of a process that I think that it's like the way that people need to think about it. Yeah. So I think maybe something else, if any of you want to share about any, like, I know Juliana, like that was a great example of a misconception that sort of the West has about like East Asian wellness. So like if anyone else wants to share misconceptions that people have about any area of wellness of that your culture, like misconceptions about your culture and wellness, I guess.
This isn't so much like my culture per se, but I've kind of noticed, like working in the health and wellness space for a couple of years now, you notice that at least at first, people really considered wellness to be like, oh, face masks and like drinking your lemon water in the morning and all these things, which are obviously very good. But I don't think that gets to the root of what wellness is. And also, that alludes to wellness as being this attainable thing only if you are like a wealthy white woman, which obviously is so untrue. And so many, everybody really has like some form of wellness in their life, or at least caters to a certain part of their life in terms of wellness. And yeah, so I guess there used to be this misconception, but I think that's starting to change, and people are really starting to think more deeply about wellness from the inside, and like understanding that wellness includes your mental health, your work life, your spiritual health, if you're religious or not. So it's kind of optimistic, but that's definitely, I think, a misconception that was had throughout the last few years at least.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the reasons I really like wanted to work for Lila was because I think the image of like the typical wellness image in general is like a white woman drinking a smoothie after spin class, but like wellness is so much more complex than that. So yeah, definitely.
Like it's like not exactly a misconception, but like with Indians, often people feel like when you think of like the word Indian, the first thing many people think about is like how they work all the time, and like work is like priority of every Indian's life. But the truth is it's really not like that. The fact that people actually like at least in the cities take a lot of time for themselves, for their family, just working out, going to the parks, so whether it's like their physical well-being or just staying outdoors and taking care of their mental well-being, it's like a lot more to the entire picture. Yes, work is one aspect, but that doesn't like govern the entire person's life. And that's just something like a sort of misconception when it comes to wellness. But yeah, that's pretty much about it.
I think a misconception that often, but as it pertains to wellness, it often gets pinned to the Black community. Honestly, especially now, especially in America, it's just this idea that we're always angry and we're always complaining about something, like, and our life is just so hard. But Black joy is a thing. Like, we are like, there's a lot to be happy about, and there's a lot of pride in like who we are. You see what I'm saying? And so I think that, again, it is frustrating to have to, and again, like as Star pointed out, one of the reasons why I was also drawn to Lila was because there was a very intentional, Lila is very intentional in diversifying the image of what wellness looks like. And it is frustrating to not see people who look like you not associated with wellness, because it seems like everybody just associates dark skin pigmentation in general with like some sort of struggle. But yeah, I think that there's a lot more joy and a lot more just goofing off and being silly in constructive ways. In constructive ways that people don't automatically associate with Black wellness.
Yeah. And I think like the media definitely capitalizes on like sort of that, like I don't, because it makes, I feel like it almost makes the media feel good to be like, see how like horrible like all the horrible things the Black community is going through, like it almost like makes them feel better to like be portraying it that way, if that makes sense.
It's a pity
If that,
project.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, for sure. Um, yeah, and so I think something else that maybe we want to touch on is that what if is there anything that you've learned about wellness from like your friends who are of different backgrounds from you that have like sort of helped you realize something that you maybe would have never experienced on your own? I
Yeah.
know like oh sorry, go ahead Danielle.
So in college, I lived with 5 roommates. So I had like 5 other girls living with me, and that's a lot of girls, and that's a lot of opinions, that's a lot of viewpoints on health and wellness. So I feel like especially at college age, you get in this habit of comparing yourself and what workouts you're doing, what you're eating to all the people around you. And I think something important that I learned in college is that everybody's wellness journey is different. Just because, I'm eating a certain way or working out a certain way doesn't mean it's going to work for someone else. Like it's so personal to what is going on in your life at one point in time. Like that could change 6 months from now. It's not going to be the same as the person that you share a wall with. So it's all very personal. And I think like that individualistic part of wellness needs to be talked about more.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
For me, like when I was transitioning from high school to college, my first semester freshman year, it was honestly a complete change. Not only was it like from high school to college, but it was like from one continent to another. So it was like a completely like different experience for me. So for me, like when I usually thought about, how do people keep their mental health in check or what they do to keep in check, because people don't talk about it much in India. I usually thought like, just gym and work out and maybe like join some club, play some sports. But it was like a lot more than that. My roommate, my first, like in my freshman year, she used to wake up every morning and, just like do some yoga, listen to a little sort of meditation exercise and do some sort of stuff like that. And initially, I never really knew what she was getting out of it because it's never something I personally engaged in. I never did like any sort of meditation in my entire life. But then once I did that once with her because she told me to try it out and not just sit there make fun of her while she's sitting and closing her eyes. So I gave it a shot and I tried it out, and I've literally never stopped since. So it worked out for me because many like in like the hustle bustle of everyday life, especially when college is so overwhelming in the first few months, just adjusting and taking it all in, just reflecting on your day, um, that really helped me. And it's something like if you don't meditate, like I recommend you just try it out. There's a lot of apps you can use or whatever. It worked for me, and yeah, I've just not stopped talking to my family about it since then. So
That's really awesome. I think it's so interesting that you're both talking about roommates because like it's something about living with people who have different backgrounds from you is so such an informative process, even though sometimes it's hard, I think, at least in my experience, but like that's really great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of really interesting topics, and if there's anything else anyone wants to share just in general, I know for me, like just because we're in this time of like the Black Lives Matter movement is like really gained so much attention over the past few weeks, and so I think like something I've been thinking about in terms of wellness is like there's no way that I as an individual can be well if like I'm not being an active ally to the Black community and just to my like communities of color in general. And I think that's something that I've really been grappling with that I just like wanted to share because wellness is just as much of a societal subject as it is individual. Again, that sort of outside in thing that we were talking about before. So yeah.
Yeah, it's really hard to navigate that balance between like evaluating your own individual wellness and like looking at societal wellness as well. Because on the one hand, most people of color don't have the opportunity to like opt out of it, feeling the effects of societal wellness or lack thereof. Um, and I think that sometimes like in the midst of the world falling, like it seems like the world is falling apart, like you can't allow yourself to get too sucked into that also, otherwise you'll just be constantly crumbling. So it's like, but you also, again, to touch on what you said, Star, like you also don't want to be completely like ignore it also and just pretend like nothing is happening. So it's just like this strange balance of, again, outside, inside, like how much, like, should I feel guilty if I feel happy and stable, but the world is falling apart? But also, if the world is happy and stable and I'm falling apart, then like, is there a discrepancy that I should feel bad about? Like what? So it's a meaningful evaluation. And like, as you've been saying throughout this entire meeting, I feel like we've all talked about it throughout this whole meeting, is that wellness is a process. Sometimes there are exterior factors, sometimes there are internal factors, but in the midst of all of it, we need to be willing to engage in dialogue about it in community.
Yeah, exactly. Because if we don't talk about it, then it's just this constant like battle in our head that we're like not sure like what other people are thinking, or like how they might be going through the same thing. So I think that's the only way to sort of like move forward in terms of how we deal with this balance of the outside inside wellness.
And on a similar note as well, I've been trying to post on social media resources for Black individuals and their mental health during this time, because like having to deal with all this institutionalized and individual racism is definitely very tolling on mental health of Black individuals. And it's something that I personally have no experience with to that extent. And just sharing resources and sharing like free therapy online and things like that, I think is really helpful during this time, and just being an ally in the best way that I can.
Yeah, 100%. Well, this has been really great. I think thank you guys so much for participating. Is there any last thing that anyone wants to add in? Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so I hope for everyone watching, I hope that you have like learned things about wellness that you might not have known before just because you had never talked to someone who had these experiences. And thank you so much for watching. And yeah, have a great day.
All right. Thank you for having us. Have a great day,
Of
guys.
course.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.